All right, welcome to Professional Leadership. And in this video, we're going to kind of continue our discussion from last week. We were on process, right? And so now we're going to move to the second part of defining expectations, which is outcomes. So an outcome is, in many ways, you could call that the fulfillment of the vision, right? The various ways that the components of your organization fulfill the vision that you have, right? And so outcomes come in a variety of forms. There's different ways that you can define an outcome. You know, there's strictly production kind of things. You know, how many televisions did we produce, right? How many sales did we close? What was our bottom line? They're financial things. I want to divide the discussion of outcomes in half, if we will. I think there are qualitative outcomes and quantitative, right? So we'll start with qualitative. Qualitative outcomes could be things like the relationships formed within the organization, between leaders and followers, between people in the organization, between your organization and outside organizations, right? If it's a church, the relationships that members form with each other, perhaps care groups, the relationship between staff. There's all kinds of relationships, new people that come in, the relationships that they're able to develop. So within an organization, there are qualitative outcomes. Are the right relationships being developed? And so in all of these outcomes, these are things that the leader is ultimately responsible for, right? And so if the leader is ultimately responsible for them, the leader has to come up with some way of monitoring them, right? Qualitative can be a little more challenging to monitor than quantitative. So quantitative is anything numbers based, and so simple spreadsheets and financial calculations, you could monitor many of your quantitative in that fashion. Qualitative monitoring might be a little different. How do you know if people are really enjoying coming to work? How do you know if people are enjoying their care group, right? So you may need to come up with some ways to monitor these types of things. Perhaps employee turnover, right? That might be a number that you could monitor to find out, do people really enjoy coming to work? Because people come with a smile often to their face to work because they don't want to lose their job. They may or may not enjoy being there, right? So perhaps turnover. Are you losing people and having to replace people quite a bit? That's often a sign that there is a qualitative problem, right? In a church, are new members getting plugged in, right? Are they getting involved in things? Do you have a lot of people leaving the church, right? Do you get a lot of complaints? Those types of things. Those are all qualitative things. Another relationship that's important to monitor is with your customers, right? Are you getting a lot of negative reviews, or are you getting positive reviews? So those are things that leadership wants to monitor, right? And you have to figure out as the leader, and you may bring other people in to help you gather the data, but as the leader, you need to be consistent with your monitoring, right? So even if you bring in some help to help you collect the data, which you probably need to, right? You need to be actively involved in them so they know what data you want collected. And it's better if you keep the same reports consistently so you can monitor trend lines, right? So qualitative. Another qualitative one are many of the character issues that we talked about. Are your salespeople exemplifying the type of character that you want your company to stand for? Is management treating employees with the type of character that you expect from your company? It's going to be challenging to monitor that, right? So as a leader, sometimes the character things you only pick up by feel, right? As you walk the halls, as you monitor how employees relate with other leaders, when you monitor how your salespeople talk about the sales that they close? Do they talk about having to manipulate some in order to get the sale closed? Those are clues that the character elements that you're trying to produce in your company are not being produced. Another one in qualitative is your overall company presentation to the world, right? So that could be things like, are you involved in the community? Do you have a good standing in the community? Another thing would be your marketing, right? The feel that your company has produced. Apple has a very sleek, high-tech, cutting-edge kind of feel in the marketplace, and a lot of that's because of their marketing, right? So that's a qualitative thing that that's an outcome of one of your processes. Your marketing process, the outcome is the overall feel that your organization has in the community. Same thing with churches. Churches need to market as well, right? They need to, whether they're trying to or not, they have a feel that they are presenting to the community. And sometimes if they're not trying and they don't focus on that, then by default they end up with a mediocre or average impact on the way that they feel to the community if they're not actively thinking about those things. So you don't market to get people for money, but you market so that people know that your church is there, so that you can do some of the other things that the church really needs to be doing, like developing disciples and pouring into people, being there for people. Sometimes the reason that they're not there is just because they don't know you're there, right? So you want to have those elements for the right reasons in your church. Now, on the quantitative, sometimes these are a little easier to follow and to monitor than your qualitative. Qualitative sometimes takes a little creativity to monitor those, but you still have to be responsible for that. And you really should think through, what are my qualitative things I want, and come up with a creative way to monitor those just as consistently as you monitor your quantitative numbers, right? So your quantitative numbers, there's a variety of them. One of the first things that will come to mind is financial numbers, right? So every organization needs to monitor their financial numbers. You don't necessarily need your CEO to be an accountant, but your CEO and your leaders should be aware of certain ratios, right, that influence them. Now, if it's the CEO, they need to be aware of ratios that influence the whole company. But mid-level managers and leaders, you want to encourage them and put in their ability and the right tools for them to monitor some of these things as well, right? So they may not be as concerned with this as the executive level would be, but for their department, every mid-level manager should have qualitative and quantitative numbers that they're monitoring as well. And so you're establishing a system of what you want to monitor as the head leader, and you are giving some guidance and instruction to mid-level managers, because they won't necessarily know this offhand. They'll know some of it, but you need to guide them into that and make sure that they are monitoring something for their department as well, right? So you want everybody at a leadership position to be monitoring some qualitative and some quantitative factors. So for the top-level management, financial is going to be very important. Mid-level management, maybe financial is important as well. They have a budget for their department, and they need to monitor certain ratios with that, so that they are not negatively affecting the overall financial picture of the company, right? So financial numbers. With financial numbers, probably the best way to do it is to sit down and determine what ratios are vital, because you could have thousands of ratios, right? I mean, thousands of numbers to look at. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. You need to narrow that list down to the most important factors that are influential in your decision making, factors that are influential in your ability to monitor the company's health, right? You don't want so much that you're not able to monitor it effectively, right? But you don't want only one or two things, because then it doesn't give you a good picture. So you've got to figure out what is the balance there for you of what you're going to monitor. So you want to have your standard financial sheets, obviously. You want to be able to look at a balance sheet You want to be able to look at an income statement. You want to look at a cash flow statement and know what they're telling you. Then you also want to include some ratios, right? Return on investment, your debt ratios. How much debt does the company have versus how many assets? There's a lot of liquidity ratios. If you needed cash, how liquid is your company? Those types of things. So there's a whole financial world of ratios. So you want to figure out the best ones. And typically, you may have your accounting or bookkeeping department, because they have access to those numbers, compile a monthly report for you, and then you just take a month to look at a day each month to review your numbers, and it helps you to lead not just from the feel you get qualitatively, but also from some hard data quantitatively. And I think the best leaders learn to do both, to get a feel for the qualitative health of their company and to have a good foundation of quantitative data to back up what they're seeing qualitatively, right? Another type of ratio that doesn't necessarily fall under financial are your productivity ratios, right? Productivity / efficiency, right? Not only how much are we producing, but how efficiently are we producing things. So that's an important thing for some companies, right? To look at their production and efficiency ratios. And then under productivity and efficiency, I would divide that between people and machines, right? So depending on what industry you're in, there's productivity that you expect from your people, perhaps a certain level of sales that you want your salespeople to reach. And then in some industries like manufacturing, the assembly line, right, itself, the machine part of it, should be producing X number of units per month. And that is influenced by your people as well. So you're not holding the machine accountable, but you're holding the machine's operators accountable, right, for their efficiency. And then kind of a third thing, just specifically for churches, in terms of quantitative, you have all of those. You have financial, you have efficiency, but then you also perhaps want to monitor attendance as a church. Not in terms of a prideful thing to say, oh, look how many people we have. You monitor attendance to find out if there are changes going on that you're not aware of. People tend to vote at churches with their presence, right? If there are things going on that people don't feel comfortable with, or things going on in the community that are drawing people away, or if your process of reaching people is not good, it will show up often in the attendance, right? And so that is not the only thing to monitor, but really as a church you should monitor that because you want to be influential in your community. You want to be reaching people. So we don't grow for pride's sake. We grow because that is our mission, is to reach people, right? And to be influential in people's lives, right? So as a leader, it is your ultimate responsibility to monitor this and to make sure that people at various levels within your organization are monitoring things that are pertinent to them as well, right? So qualitative, quantitative, I wouldn't put one above the other, right? But you need to put them side by side and see what story they're telling about your company and monitor both of them consistently, right? And have ways that you can actually monitor the qualitative, right? Don't just assume, right? Look for ways that you can get a determination on the qualitative state of your company, right? If you want to know the character that your salespeople use, maybe you institute a follow-up survey for your customers, right? Find out how your customers perceive your salespeople, right? Things like that, okay? So there are creative ways to monitor the qualitative health, and there are very straightforward mathematical ways to monitor the quantitative health of your organization.